So welcome everyone to this week's edition of Military Trailblazer Office Hours. Thanks so much for taking time out of your Wednesday evening, even amidst the excitement of Dreamforce, to spend it here in the spirit of community, mentorship, and of course, learning. I'm your host, Dave Nana. I'm a lead solution engineer at Salesforce and a military trailblazer. Each week, we invite a co-host, or in this case, co-host, to take part in the conversation so we can leverage their experience, their expertise, and their unique perspectives. The focus for tonight's session is exploring the depth and breadth of careers at Salesforce with some career paths that you may not be aware of. So if you've ever wondered what it's like to blaze your trail in the health and safety management, workplace services, or executive administration career paths, this is the session for you. And I'd like to welcome and briefly introduce our co-host for tonight's session. Suzi Smith has been in the compliance field for 17 years, specializing in health and safety since 2012. She's worked in utilities and manufacturing before joining Salesforce 4 years ago. Marc Williams has been in the hospitality facilities industry for 20 plus years. Prior to working with law firms before joining Salesforce in 2014, he worked as a crisis counselor. It is awesome to have you all here co-hosting office hours with me. Welcome. So if you could just, Suzi and Marc, just give us a real quick Salesforce journey story for us and tell us how you discovered Salesforce. That would be awesome. Suzi, do you want to get started?
Sure. So I'm Suzi Smith. I'm Health and Safety Manager supporting Amera East. My home office is New York. That's actually how I met my co-host here, Marc, when he was in the New York office. I did not start out thinking I was going to be in health and safety, to be quite honest. I wanted to be a high school chemistry teacher, a long way from that, but started with an internship in utilities in college, fell in love with doing like true analytical chemistry, got into the compliance world. I like math. I like analytics. It was just kind of my thing. Sort of thought I didn't go find myself. So I quit to go be a flight attendant with the Department of Defense charter and just travel the world for a year to get my head back on straight. And then in that, though, that was really kind of where I was like, you know what? I really like this compliance field. Got into you can see this is not a linear track for me. Got into construction. And I think that's where I really fell in love with health and safety. So I was in construction and I was doing onboarding and training for refugees. So we helped place refugees into construction roles in the city of Atlanta. And we were realizing none of our stuff is translated properly. Like we don't have a way that we can appropriately train these people so they can be safe at work. And I fell in love with it. Got back into utilities, back into a health and safety focus, got into the emergency response team. Both my wife and I are certified EMTs. And I think how I got into Salesforce, though, was in a traditional health and safety environment. It's very boring. I mean, you can only make ladder safety so fun in so many ways. But when you're in this field, sometimes you're helping people on the worst day of their life. If they've gotten hurt, if their spouse has been hurt or their child has been hurt, or they're just dealing with something that's happened that maybe doesn't happen very often. It's kind of rare in some industries to have bad accidents, but in the utility world, it was wasn't rare for us to have that. And so to know that you can be part of that, to be helping someone, was something I really loved. What drew me to Salesforce, though, was it's like, you know what, this isn't a 9-to-5 thing. People can get hurt outside of work. They can be going through things outside of work that then affect their safety at work. Salesforce, our vice president of global health and safety, Carl Hunziker, he had a presentation I actually saw on LinkedIn that was about safety and marketing and about you have to approach some of these shared services type fields with a marketing mindset of you have to get people to want to do it. You have to get people engaged. You have to make it fun and exciting for them. And that's where our program of what we call CAREforce, which is communicate, assist, respond, and educate. That is our health and safety engagement program at Salesforce. And so that's why I saw it. I followed it. I essentially waited for the right job opportunity and applying, and I got in, and I love it. I've been here 4 years now. And I love the fact that here at Salesforce, when we talk about caring for our employees and caring for their health and safety, it's 24/7 for them and for their family, because we recognize, you know what, if something's going on in your personal life, you're now more at risk of getting hurt. So that's how I got here, and I love it. And glad I got to share it with y'all too. So I'll turn it over to my buddy Marc here.
Well, thank you. I do not have that tremendous path like that, but Suzi is one of my partners and stakeholders and just a joy to work with. But she said something it just resonated with me as it relates to, really us caring for not only the employees in the building, but throughout. So let me back up a little bit to kind of tell you a little bit of how I got here myself. So I have a dual major in psychology and sociology, and David kind of told you that I was a crisis counselor. So much like Susie, I used to meet people on the worst day of their life, right? They call and there is some type of trauma going on, and right then and there was always about connection and serving. You know, I always had a heart and a desire to serve, but it also taught me about really deep listening, because you have to hear things that is not being said. And again, at that same time, you have to be able to activate or dispatch particular services to maybe those individuals. And so as I worked that job, there's no face that is with any of those individuals. And so I would leave that job, always wondering, I'll be in the grocery store, go to the gym. I wonder if I talked to that person, or I wonder if that was because again, none of us wear any t-shirt that says we're suffering or we're going through anything. No one does that. Sometimes we don't even know how to verbalize it. And so, as that particular job took form, I wanted to kind of serve in some capacity to where I could actually make or see some type of presentable change. So I got into facilities management because it was every day. I can make a difference and do something every day, and I can affect change and anticipate needs. One of the things you want to be able to do is anticipate a need. Anybody can meet a need, but very few people can anticipate a need. And so I was able to build relationships in this small law firm. I got my first supervisor job and just loved it. Really loved how, I was making the coffee and putting cookies and stuff in the vending machine and bringing in the paper and turning on the lights, and nobody knew how any of that got done. And then one day I was off and, I got these calls like, hey, something's not right. And it was just a matter of they got used to me always turning on the light, right? Fast forward, did that for many different major law firms here in the Atlanta area. And lo and behold, I got laid off my job. And so I'm doing my job search. And as I'm doing my job search, I'm looking at, and I'll never forget it, it was a security job for school. It was, and I used to control a lot of the CCTs and access cards and badging and things like that in many different places. And so some of the CTT software and badge access software, they used to call different things, right? And so it said you had to do Salesforce. And I was like, well, I probably did it. I just don't know if that's what they call it. So I'm putting in for this job. And if you know anything about being laid off, you have to make a record of the jobs that you actually did, right? So I was curious. And I said, well, let me go see what this Salesforce is so I can actually really be confident that I'm doing Salesforce. Lo and behold, went to the website. Hey, they're hiring. And trust me, again, if you've ever been laid off, you have to put in so many different things. And I was like, I'm gonna get me another one of these jobs, put in for 2 jobs. I was done with my entries. There was a job that was for a facilities coordinator and for a front desk receptionist, right? So put in for both jobs. I have all of my entries for the week done. I've done my job search. I'm going to end up getting my check. Well, lo and behold, again, you either get a letter from the potential employer, or you were to get an email saying, hey, look, we filled the role, or thank you for your interest. Well, I actually got one back that said, thank you for your interest, but we already selected a candidate for the Salesforce job. And I was like, okay. I was like, well, I think I put in 2. Next thing you know, I would say the next day I got a call asking if I wanted to interview. Went through that process. And lo and behold, I show up for the interview here. The person who was interviewing me was so busy, and they couldn't really they didn't have a lot of time to spend with me. And they were like, thank you for your patience. I appreciate it. I have to do this and I had to do this. And I said, well, obviously you need me. When do you need me to start? What is it? And I got the job. Also was able to work side by side with the person who was hired for the facilities the receptionist job. And I've been here for almost 8 years, and it has been the absolute best decision I've ever done. And so oftentimes when people think about facilities, I think about people. Facilities really, because I feel like I'm responsible for not only your safety, but your experience when you walk through that building to do the tremendous work that you do. So that's kind of my story right now. I'm the senior manager of the South region. I actually cover 7 states. Again, I'm just tickled pink that I'm here to be able to share the story with you. But so it's not as exciting as Suzi's, but it's my journey, my story, and I'm gonna hold on to it as well.
Thanks so much, Marc and Suzi. Those are awesome transition stories. And typically when we have these sessions, we focus on the technical, but it's what I wanted to do was draw attention to those roles where you don't have to have necessarily certifications in Salesforce, and it really comes down to what are your soft skills that you can leverage to be incredibly successful. And it sounds like both Suzi and Marc, with your career paths, that's where the focus is on some of those soft skills where you have to interact with people on often their worst days and turn that around. That's incredibly powerful. So we'll dive into that a bit more, but thanks so much for sharing that. And before we do continue, I wanted to, because I know we've got some first time attendees on, which is awesome. So if you're joining for the first time, thank you. I always like to briefly explain the purpose of office hours before we kind of open the floor for questions and discussion, just so everyone knows how it works. So if you're attending for the first time, these sessions are totally informal. They're a get together for gathering essentially with everyone, military trailblazers and allies. Everyone's invited to explore non-technical Salesforce career and branding related topics, basically to help you achieve your professional development goals. And so for this next hour, this is your opportunity for collaborative mentorship. And what that means is really everyone on the call is encouraged to step up and both ask and answer questions from your perspective, this collaborative dialogue, which provides that wealth of experience to the answers that we're able to give. Do keep an eye on the chat window throughout the session tonight. I'll be posting some things in chat, links from LinkedIn and Twitter about jobs open, resources, Dreamforce stuff. And then also, as I noticed, some of you have already started, please do share your LinkedIn profiles. Let's get connected. That's always helpful. Now, I've already shared both Erica, Marc, and Suzi's LinkedIn profiles if you want to connect with them on LinkedIn. If you have questions at any point during today's session, this is your session, right? So go ahead and raise your hand and we'll call on you in the order received. But if you don't feel comfortable speaking up, no worries at all. I'll be monitoring chat too. So just paste your question in chat and we'll get that as well. And then finally, tonight's session is being recorded. So if you want to share an attribution-free comment or ask a question that you may not feel comfortable being recorded, totally fine. Just give me a heads up and I'll go ahead and make sure it's edited out before the final recording. All right. So with that, before we jump into each of your careers, I'd love to get a bit deeper into kind of your transitions, right? So we talked about some of the different career paths that you've gone through, which is awesome because many of us on this call have done many different things in our careers. And so it doesn't really matter where you come from. It's the journey to get where you're going. I think that is really, really interesting. And there's commonalities there, regardless of what careers you were in. There are challenges that you've had to go through, and there's lessons learned and skills learned that you can share with everyone, regardless of their journey, that will be helpful to them. So I wanted to dive into that. So open to the panel, what strategy really did you use to select your career path with respect to the actual, researching it, training for it, applying for it? We talked a little bit about it, but if you had any lessons learned from that, I would love to hear them.
Sure. So I think some of the things I've learned from my best mentors, both professionally and personally, is going for the thing that brings you joy. So, we say we live, what is it? We work to live, not live to work. But at the end of the day, we spend a lot of time at work. And so finding something that brings you joy and or just identifying what it is that brings you joy, what those little things are, to where when things get tough or when you're not having the best day, you can at least kind of pinpoint and be like, but you know what, I did that and that brings me joy. In health and safety, doesn't bring a lot of people joy. I mean, it's sometimes it's like I said, it's some really bad days, but I love teaching. So I loved tutoring high school students for science and math. And so I get to take this thing of like still taking a subject that most people don't want to get involved with, that they, are doing it only because they think they have to, and saying, you know what, but you actually do this every day. You get your young child to put a helmet on, you put a seatbelt on in the car, you ask your, maybe elderly parents not to get on a ladder by themselves outside. Like we live in this world all the time. And so being able to say, you know what, that brings me joy, is training and helping people find new information. So when I was looking for something, that was like, does that meet what I want to do? Because I knew I was confident enough I could sell that. And so I would say the second piece is, and that took me a long time into my career to be like, you know what, I'm good at this. I can sell myself on this. I can show this talent. I can express this in an interview. I can express it on paper. And also understanding, to kind of Marc's story, sometimes it's going to be a mismatch. Sometimes I'm going to go for something and it's not going to work out, or sometimes they'll come for me and I would have already taken something else. But it's just that, you know what, I'm confident. I know what brings me joy. And so at least maybe if it wasn't the right fit at that point in my life, I still was like, but there's this part of it that I really love doing. And that's, I also really love analytics. So did not know what Salesforce was. I was YouTubing it, trying to figure out what it was before my interviews. I was like, I have family members that still don't quite understand. And I'm like, when you buy a car at CarMax, that's Salesforce. You see how they have all your info? Like, I have to start using examples for them. So I did not know. I was one of those that did not know. I did as much research as I could. But then I started realizing, to Marc's point, how many businesses I worked with that use Salesforce that I did not even know that I was using until we got in here. So.
Yeah, that's great. I love focus on your joy, focus on your passion, and if you can bring that into your work, that's fantastic. What about you, Marc?
Well, actually, it's very similar, but I can tell you that when I graduated, I didn't think about passion or anything like that. I thought about dollars and making money. So it wasn't until when you made $25,000, I thought I was going to be rich, and that didn't bring me joy. And then I made $35,000, and that didn't bring me joy. And then I got a title, and so all of those things that you thought you wanted that didn't amount to things, now you start to really try to look and become what I call professionally aware, or I was professionally immature, right? And there's a growth process that you have to go through. I think I passionately care about people. I'm an empathetic person who really has a heart to serve. Did not know that I just love meeting people and embracing. If you really ever, I'm a big hugger. I love to hug, and I'm always, there's people that I just love to embrace people, because you never know what a person is going through. And so what I found is that I was able to, thank you, Iris, I was able to serve in a facilities management piece where I actually had multiple touch points in which I could really effectively speak about all of what we could offer, whether it be from a security point, desk, if you needed food, it didn't matter what it was that you may have needed when you came into the building, snacks, room, whatever. At some particular point in time, you were either going to deal with me, or you were going to deal with someone from my team. And so when I first started, we were answering phones and transferring calls. Like now we don't even have phones at our desk anymore. But it was that, along with being the face, the voice of, trying to make someone's day in the voice of, or to greet people, to impact them in such a powerful way, that I started to understand my groove. I started to understand what my calling card was. I started to understand what my gift was without really ever identifying it, or for someone to be able to call it out. And then I got into leadership, and then I started to understand I need to think about the type of leader I want to be. Before, it was always about the shift differential or the $2, more. Never thought about how you could actually care for the people that you're leading. You can be the example. You can be the empathetic ear. You can help navigate their careers and campaign and champion all of those things in terms of networks and things like that. But you also have stakeholders who are now customers and things like that, that you can also join in that same way. And so, there's many different other routes just within our actually org, right? You can be in projects. You could be from, with the M&A team, and M&A is mergers and acquisitions. And we've had tons of those, right? And so there's so many different other avenues as it relates to real estate that you could actually be, it's a good ground level, right? There's nobody that I know, unless you had a parent or that actually gets into facilities management. That's not that you don't wake up, that's when the teacher asks you, hey, what do you want to be when you get hey, I want to be a facilities manager. That's, unless your parents are that's not what they're saying. And so there's a different route. It's kind of, around the yellow brick road. But if you have the heart to actually serve, it's a tremendous career.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of what you're saying, Mark, dovetails with what Suzi is saying. So Suzi mentioned following your passion, and you talked about your calling card, your gift. And ultimately, I don't really think it matters what you do, as long as you are doing something you're passionate about and you're doing something that you feel is providing a gift to others.
Yes.
And you mentioned, you're a people person, and with workplace services, it's about people. And I would 100% agree. And I would go so far as to say that regardless of your role in this ecosystem, and we've got, hundreds of different roles, whether you're a technical architect, whether you're, health and safety manager, workplace services, and executive admin, it all comes down to people.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, who are you trying to help?
Yes.
Not some system, right? You're trying to help people who are using the system.
I like to say thank you for that, because I like to say, we're talking about this super connector. I was a super connector long before they start talking about the super connector, because again, it was your guests, it was your clients, it was the regular employees. Again, there's so many different stakeholders that, a lot of people would ask me, like, well, who's your boss? And I was like, everyone's my boss, because I serve everyone. So at any particular point in time, you're only as good as the last, or the person that's in front of you. So I always want to be present. I always want to make sure that I maximize that moment, that opportunity. And it's always about serving. And at least that's the way I've always looked at it.
Yeah, and I would agree. And I think that regardless of the role, I've seen in my short time in the ecosystem, a lot of successful people doing a lot of great work. And the one thing they had in common is they took care of the people. And that's what made them successful. Yeah, they were technically proficient, sure, but what set them above everyone else is the care that they put into their relationships that they were creating with people. I'm sorry, go ahead, Suzi. Did you have something?
I was just going to say on the comment, because Lindsay had kind of put a question in about the different type of roles. I think one thing that's really unique about kind of shared services roles, essentially like ours, is, to Mark's point, we do serve everyone, but we're also each other's biggest stakeholder sometimes. So like we have employee success or maybe more of a traditional term of HR, REWS, and global safety and security are all under one leader because we're that large kind of shared services organization. And each one of our teams relies on the other team in order to really do what we need to do. So, to Mark's point, he has 7 offices. I'm not there. I directly rely on his team to help have some of my initiatives done. His team will directly rely on us to have a policy updated or to roll out some information. So we work so closely together. And the interesting thing on the technical skills, we've all become very proficient in Salesforce because we run on our own, we drink our own Kool-Aid, as we say. So REWS has a huge ticketing system and built out a system that they own. We have a huge case management system. So we came into it, not necessarily in these technical roles, but one of the great things about it is we use our own products just as much as any of the other technical fields do in Salesforce. We're just not building it out for a customer. Our customer are employees, to Mark's point. So we're building our products out for our employees to use them just like an external customer would. So, and I wouldn't have had that experience, I don't think, in a different company. So.
And David, I don't mean to step on your wisdom, but I wanted to also say this, is that when you talk about some other roles, I know Lindsay had asked that question. Again, you would never believe we have culinary roles here. We have Ohana floors, right? So the culinary team, our chefs, our cooks, and things like that, they are under the REWS umbrella, right? We have a front of house. We have back of house. We have campus event planners. We have space planning. There's so many. It's not always the technical. First of all, I can't fix nothing. I can tell you, I can't fix nothing. So some facilities isn't always about fixing things. And again, I used to think that. And there are facilities engineers. And we have an MEP team who are building engineers and who do know technical things. What I am is a liaison and a connector. I build relationships, I build teams, I bring people together. And so again, never in a million years would I believe this for me. To be honest, I didn't see any of this. And so we also, if you've ever been on any of our floors, again, I have an irrigation system here. Plants, over 10,000 plants. I don't have I have no plants at home. But lo and behold, I'm the one, quote unquote, responsible for it. But it really isn't me, it's my team. But all of those individuals make up this ecosystem. And so there's all kind of different roles and responsibilities that we have that we get to serve everyone.
Yeah, I appreciate you both calling out Lindsay's question. I had missed that in chat, so thank you so much. And just for the folks that may not be familiar with the REWS acronym, could you just explain that briefly?
Real estate and workplace services.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
I didn't know what it was before for the longest
Yeah.
time. People say, "Oh, you're REWS?" I said, "No, I'm Marc. I don't know what you're talking about."
That's hilarious. Let's go. So, question from Lindsay in chat here, and she is asking, Suzi, do you have any particular success stories you can share where CAREforce helped an employee or their family? Awesome question. And it's 2-part. Are there any subgroups or communities you can talk about related to GS and S or CAREforce?
Yeah. So yes, great, Lindsay. CAREforce. So one of the amazing things, I told you we had an acronym. We love acronyms in Salesforce. So it's CARES, the Communicate, Assist, Response, and Educate. One of the reasons I came here was the ASSIST acronym. And so part of our ASSIST program is we have a CAREforce Hardship Relief Fund. So it's a 2-part. One is a CAREforce Immediate Resistance, means that any employee that finds themselves in the need to evacuate or their home becomes uninhabitable, say it's in the middle of a polar vortex and they have no heat, say a pipe burst and their home is flooded, then they automatically have access to $1,000 via their corporate Amex to help them get to a hotel, get some sort of that immediate evacuation assistance. We also have what's called the CAREforce Hardship Relief Fund. It is a nonprofit. We run through a nonprofit partner, E4E Relief, that is funded on donations. And this allows employees to apply for a grant, short-term grants up to $5,000, long-term grants up to $10,000 for various different emergencies, be it a personal hardship or natural disaster. This could range anywhere from, I'm going to use polar vortex. Lindsay, you got me thinking Texas because you're on the call. So when we had the polar vortex in Texas a couple years ago, I mean, we had people whose whole homes were flooded out, of course, because of their pipes were frozen. I mean, their homes were not inhabitable. They maybe spent who knows how much on a hotel because hotels were hard to come by. And, those expenses really added up. They were able to apply for that grant to help offset some of that financial cost. It's not immediate. It takes a couple weeks to process, but that's kind of an example of a natural disaster. On the other scale of that is Ukraine. So we've had employees who have had direct family members who were impacted, who were in Ukraine, needed to evacuate from Ukraine, employees that were in Ukraine, that we were able to also expand that program. Actually, part of our overall department, kind of building into your second question, we have a resilience org, part of our crisis management business continuity team that spun up what we call the Ukraine Resource Hub. And so this was where employees could ask questions, almost crowdsource answers on, what's the best way? What's the train route? What's the hotel? Is there a place to help somebody get a visa if they're evacuating to go work in another country? Those are those really impactful things that our team has been able to help with. And it's a broad range of teams. It's, benefits, different groups in ES, leaders in those local areas that we're able, when you really can see an impact on helping these employees. And so maybe it's not a workplace injury, but that person can't work in the situation that they're in. So we need to help them. It has the same impact on the business if we don't help these employees. And I'm really proud to be part of an org that does that. I put some in the chat. Our global safety and security is everything from executive protection to some of our highest leaders of the company, to our intelligence arm. So looking at both internal and external threats to the company, business continuity. We run our Go Center. Go Center is, think of an internal 911 for the best way to describe it. It's a 24/7 operation that is there for employee assistance and monitoring for any threat that could be for our employees. So say if there's a tornado warning and we realize there's 15 employees that are living in the potential path of this tornado, then we will reach out to them and say, hey, are you safe? Can you confirm that you're safe? So it's a really broad range. And it's really interesting to be on this with Marc because our team just works hand in hand with their team, because we're also always looking, how does this impact our offices? How do we need to scale our offices up or down to protect people? Do they need a place to come because they have no heat? Or do we need to close the office because we're in a blizzard and we're going to get a foot of snow? So I'm really proud to work here. It's to be able to help people like that.
That's fantastic. I didn't know about some of those resources that I have access to as an employee. So great to learn that. I know that Elo, you've got your hand raised for a question or comment. You've got the floor.
Yeah, no, I was going to share with what Suzi was talking about. As an employee of Salesforce, I'm an at-home employee, which means I work 100% from home. I've been there for 9.5 years. And she mentioned that blizzard that we had. We also had a tornado in Round Rock. That's the little town I live in. We've never had a tornado. I think somebody said it's something like 95 years the last time this town had a tornado. And I got to tell you, it was fantastic to get a notice that, hey, we're aware of something that happened in your town, and if you need help, here's some numbers. And I tell you, it's really touches your heart when your company goes beyond just, hey, you're an employee, an employer relationship, but to have somebody in Suzi's group reach out to us out in remote areas to feel connected. It's pretty awesome. So I just wanted to share that story.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Elio. It goes back to it being about people, and Salesforce does a great job of making you feel like a person, not just another cog in the wheel, so to speak. I wanted to kind of build upon what we've been doing about challenges. So if each of you, in the context of your role, workplace services, health and safety management, could talk about what's like the most difficult challenge you faced and how did you tackle it and what did you learn from it? I love these stories.
You want to go first, Marc? Okay. I'm going to say COVID. I mean, I know that's maybe an overused answer, but in my world, we have what we call kind of a black swan event. Those events that we think will happen, but we really never think will happen. So my entire career, we've had emergency response plans and crisis management plans that had a pandemic response. But nobody ever really thought it would happen, or just you can't, it's something out of the movies. We never thought it could be that way, and you never thought your systems could fail the way that they would fail. And it was, to me, it was the first story Marc told. It was, no, you had a name, but you didn't have a face. And we had people who were losing grandparents, losing children. In India, that was the first kind of response hub we spun up. There were no hospital beds. There were no oxygen tanks. And so people are looking to you because in their local area, the civil structures are failing. Like the resources are not there. So they're looking to their company because we're a global company. We have these resources to where we can at least find them, the information on where can you go get that. The COVID experience for me was also, had to look internally. It was a test mentally for me as well. You can only, it really pushed on how much can we take care of ourselves and also take care of others. So I had to really figure out how to set boundaries for when there is some sort of disaster like that. How do I make sure that I still feel fulfilled by helping people, but I don't put myself in harm's way mentally in the same place? Those were some dark times for many of us to try to balance that. And I think, but that's where I also was able to learn to lean on some of my coworkers that are now probably stronger friends that I wouldn't have necessarily called before. We were all dealing with the same thing and learning to talk about it. And I think it was traumatic I think through the amount of phone calls and the emails and everything that we answered. An 85,000 people company, there was a lot of sadness that came around with what people were faced with. So that was the hardest. I mean, I've seen some terrible accidents and injuries in my career. I've seen fatalities, fortunately, in my career, but this was the first one that stressed me mentally like that, where I really had to take stock of that, and really, I can't take care of someone else if I don't take care of myself. So that was for me. Marc, I feel like we're all about people, but I also feel like we're
no, but Suzi,
we're sharing some sad stories here.
No, but you remind me of, again, COVID. Again, I'm still dealing with COVID, but COVID in a different way, right? Because now, because of COVID, we got success from anywhere. And when you are in facilities management, everything has everything to do with the building, right? So without the building, there is no job for me, right? And so for many of my team members, it was a very stressful time, not having some uncertainty. There were some offices that closed. And if you all remember, for many people that wasn't fortunate enough to work for Salesforce, there actually was a lot of people who lost their jobs, right? We had to let some people go, and not because of what we wanted, it was because of how we were contracted. So many, some of our vendors, we still kept on staff. You would have no idea all of the precautions and signage and things that we did in order to prep the offices for you that you never even got to see. We had countless meetings. Suzi and I are still on a bi-weekly meeting as it relates to what COVID numbers are, what, is there testing, and still. And what it was I had team members who lost family members, who lost spouses, who lost parents. And we were coming in just trying to be there for each other. We were going through a very stressful time in our country. So there was a lot of shift, but I can tell you we came together and we knew each other differently. We again, it wasn't because of I'm at the front desk and I do mail. I know that you like that show on Netflix, and I know that you got 3 kids and 2 dogs and 8 cats, and I know that you like to cook, and everybody knows. So we start to really see each other, really see each other. And if a lot of times, you know, we became, you know, surrogate brother, sister, or whatever for everybody else, but we showed up different because we had to. And so that was our success from anywhere. So now we are walking concierge and billboard for what that really means. We have some battle scars to go with it, but I can tell you we are so much better. I think there were a lot of people who were able to discover who they were in solitude. There was so much going on that they were so busy that it was quiet enough to say, you know what, I don't think I like this. I like kind of wanted to do this. And, you know, and it gave us some time to really stop and be able to, you know, say, is this really what I want to do? You usually don't ask that question. Is this worth it? Is this because we seen family members, or we seen reports, or we needed another booster shot, or you weren't allowed to go here, or you couldn't get your nails done, or you couldn't do this. And again, I think I picked up over 20 pounds in COVID. And I was on phone calls, sometimes literally 16 hours a day. Because you know, I'm part of global groups. And because of time zones, I was on certain calls that were timed. It was a really stressful period, but I wanted to be not only a confident leader in a time of uncertainty. And I hope, you know, it's changed me for the best. It's changed me for the better. But that was a really crazy time for us.
Yeah, those are powerful stories, and kind of the undercurrent there is because you're both in charge of essentially caring for people, but you can't, to Suzi's point, you can't care for them if you're not caring for yourself. So that whole work-life balance quotient comes back into play. And as much as you would want to continue working around the clock, you just can't, because then the quality of care that you're able to provide would suffer, which you don't want to let happen. So you got to make time for yourself. That's the difficult time. Thankfully, we're still dealing with it, but it's gotten better. I wanted to get into a little bit about how you grow in your current role. So what are the things that you do to keep learning and to keep professionally developing yourself?
I learned the technology. So that's been, I don't like being somewhere where I don't know what somebody else knows. So it's been kind of a bit of a challenge. Been like, I don't know what a Salesforce record was, or I don't know how to run a report, or I'm currently in a state of I'm not real good at Tableau. So we have to, because we talked about our job is caring for these people. There's 85,000 or so of them. That's a lot of data points. That it's where I challenge myself to grow is, okay, how can I put that in some sort of data visualization to help our team scale? Because, you know, where it's not a 1-for-1 ratio for employees. So we need to kind of know what's out there and how do we move more efficiently to be able to help people faster. And so that's how, and it's also something, the power of Trailhead and everything, it's things I can do on my own time. It's things I can do with, my wife, if she's interested learning. It's things I can watch Stranger Things on Netflix while I try to figure out a Tableau viz. And so it's because I'm doing it on information that I like, that I find interesting, and trying to help figure out how do I make myself more efficient at it. And at the same time, learn a new Salesforce tool. And I think from what I found in my team is when you can use those tools, it makes you more efficient. It just makes you grow faster. It gives you more time in your day to then take on new challenges and new opportunities, because you can just move much more efficiently. Yeah, that's one of my personal goals right now, to move.
I love that, because even though your role may not necessarily call for it, as you mentioned a couple of times, you love analytics, so you're able to leverage our products to be able to provide added value by getting technical. But even though it's not in the job description, you're able to add value to your organization and be able to create value where there wasn't any before, simply by following things that are passionate to you. So I mean, it's something I've discovered in my career as well. You know, whether or not the service that I want to perform is part of the job or not, if it will add value and I have the bandwidth to do it, and if others aren't doing it, gosh, what a great way not only to help the team but to stand out as a, you know, as a contributor and as a performer. So that's really interesting. But I wanted Mark, what about you?
So I've actually do a lot of training just like Susie does, but I also think you have to kind of be up on your industry. You got to know what's going on in your industry. I'm always reading. I'm part of IFAMA, and I'm part of, you know, other organization groups. I currently am enrolled in a Wharton school right now. I've taken classes at Cornell. And again, it has everything to do with, you know, something you had said a little bit earlier, David, was the soft skills, and they keep changing in a different way. One of the classes that I've taken was diversity and inclusion classes, and here, you know, that's one of the new buzzwords. And I can tell you, you know, we've missed the mark as it relates to veterans, as it relates to diversity and inclusion. If it wasn't for veterans, we wouldn't have the opportunities that we have in order to be able to do the things that we do. And so that space isn't, you know, made in a way in which, you know, because I don't think that people think about inclusion in that way. I run a program in a couple of my offices called the ARC program. And this is the program in which they are for individuals who are able differently, right? They actually are part of our population as well. And so I want to be a more thoughtful leader. I want faces that look like mine, so that look like Amber's, that look like Doors, that look like Roman's. Because that's our community, right? I want to live in a place and work at a place that really looks like our community, and make room and space for individuals and voices that there weren't voices before. So a lot of that has to do with new training and wanting to be a better version of leadership than maybe it was done in the past. I know that Salesforce all cares about how we lead, and we lead with empathy, and we lead, you know, intentionally. And so I really want to double down on those things and those values, because again, I think once our team knows that they feel like they've been thought of and cared for, then we get a chance to help navigate their careers as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's not always about the hard skills that you have to brush up on. Sometimes it's the soft skills and how you take care of your people. And sometimes that, you know, that can fall by the wayside because we're thinking about the latest certification or the latest Astro course tracker, which is our internal training system that we have to get done because we have so many other things on our plate. But making time for those skills that help us take care of each other, you know, equally, if not more important. I know we've got some questions in the chat here, and I see, thank you, Susie, for answering Lindsay's question about geographic areas, and we'll get to Iris's question, followed by Carrie's. So Iris asks, let's see here, great point about, and we're backing up a little bit here, great point about work-life balance. How do you take care of yourself so that you can better serve? You know, what are some practices that you do specifically?
Chalk art. So I took up sidewalk chalk art. My wife and I both did over the pandemic because, to Mark's point of 16-hour-a-day meetings, it's like, ooh, I have an hour gap. Let's go outside and draw. For me, it was therapy and art that I found. I loved it. Surprisingly, we were really good at it. And that's what we did. Along with reading, I read what we would call cozy mysteries, or AKA Hallmark movies in a book. And then I should exercise more, I will say that, but those 16-hour meetings, my Apple Watch often tells me that I'm sedentary. So that is something I don't do, that I still have a goal to do more of. But for now, the art is where I found has really been an outlet for me. So.
That's really, really cool. And you never run out of the canvas, right? Because you've got unlimited sidewalk. Mark, do you have any best practices that you like to do, things that, you know, activities for when you need to wind down?
Yeah, you know, I really, most people don't know this, but I'm like a hermit, right? You would think that I'm outgoing, but I like to empty myself every day. And then I take time to kind of build up my reserve. Sometimes before the pandemic, I used to go to the gym. And again, I told you I put some weight on. I actually, based upon where I live and my commute, I have a pretty long commute. So I like to listen to podcasts, do, YouTube videos and things like that. But again, I think I'm also a big, huge sports fan. I find pleasure in, those things that make me smile, but I know what it is that I need to do in order to empty again myself for the next day. So I pretty much have a nice little routine, but on, like, it's football season now. You can't get me to stop smiling. I might have to put my teeth in with the mouthpiece, but yeah. So I'm pretty deliberate about my time, because again, when you empty yourself out, you kind of know what you have to do in order to serve other people.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that. I know we've got 5 minutes left, and I wanted to get to Carrie's question as well. Carrie asks, what are some lessons you've learned as a leader over the years that you could share?
I'm going to probably defer this one to Mark, but I will say we're actually hiring for a health and safety role, also based in New York. This will be my first time as a maybe a literal people leader at Salesforce. What I will say is I have learned more about being prepared to be a people leader at Salesforce than I have learned in the previous 15 years of my career. The resources to help me feel confident in how to hire someone, how to coach someone, how to be comfortable in that, have been amazing. And I'm not even a people leader yet, but that has been things I didn't know that I needed to know, that I've been able to learn at Salesforce just through the resources that have been out there, and then my manager. So that's been a really cool experience, just learning how to do that. But I'll turn that one. I'll let Mark lead this one.
Yeah, I've been a people leader for a long time, and I guess I kind of hinted to it a little bit. Like, I didn't never think about what type of leader I wanted to be until I got here. One of the things that has been the most gratifying is to be able to help people get to where they want to be in their career, and you help navigate it in such a way that, whether it be a promotion or a connection or whatever, really showing up and supporting an individual as a partnership, right? Leading empathy with empathy, hearing and understanding that there's a responsibility in the connection, that real leadership is nothing but a long conversation. Sometimes we misunderstand each other. Sometimes I have to repeat myself a little bit. And sometimes I didn't articulate what my real need was, right? And so I think about, how is it that I'm being received all the time, right? And if I'm being who they need me to be and not just being me. Because you got to be able to coach to some of the most terrific talent. You can't just have your style. Yeah, there's a core me, but I think you get an opportunity to be able to coach to many different talented people who have different personalities. And I think that piece was really what turned the corner for me. Is it wasn't enough for me just to be me. I need to be who they needed me to be. And I want it to be better for them and my team.
That's a really interesting dynamic. You wanted to be who they needed you to be. And then also something you said that was interesting was leadership is nothing but a long conversation. I like that. Very cool. All right. Well, hey, everyone, we are pretty much at time here. But before we do close, I wanted to thank Suzi and Marc for spending the past hour with us talking about workplace services, health and safety management, and just all things Salesforce. It's been awesome having you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, that's been great. And thank you for having us both. I mean, I'd love to be on any panel with Suzi.
Awesome. And thank you to all of you for spending time with us in the midst of Dreamforce on a Wednesday for the past hour. It was great to see all of you, and we hope to see you next week. Please stay safe.